Very good. Okay, the meeting will come to order, the House Revenue Committee. We have one bill to hear today. Welcome, folks who are here. And are there any citizens online?
No, sir.
Not at this time. We
Not
have a
at this
very
time.
interesting topic. I'm sure it'll fill it up. Okay, Ms. Cruz, can you please take the roll? Thank you.
Certainly. Representatives Baker.
Here.
Gray.
Here.
Hallinan.
Here.
Henderson.
Here.
Jennings.
Excused, he'll be here, yeah.
Roscoe.
Here.
Sweeney.
Here.
Yin.
Here.
Mr. Chairman.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have 8 present, 1 excused.
Okay, very good. Well, we have one bill, members, and this is the Speaker's bill, House Bill 147. Mr. Speaker, pleasure to have you with us. If you take us through your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'd say, I think it's the first time I've ever appeared before the Revenue Committee, so I appreciate this opportunity. Spent a lot of time in Labor Health and Judiciary and other committees, but I don't know if I've ever been in front of the Revenue Committee.
We'll hope to make it memorable.
Yes, I'm sure you will, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, I think cash-based budget development, House Bill 147, this bill encapsulates 2 things. It encapsulates what I guess I'd call more of a philosophical approach to how we approach government and government spending and budgeting. And then much of the bill is the actual application, how we could accomplish it in the state of Wyoming. And so it's about moving dollars, making dollars available to accomplish it. I want to be clear that the philosophical goal is far more important to me than the details of which dollars go to which account. As you saw when we did our budget yesterday, we were switching around dollars. We were taking dollars out of permanent funds and putting them into reserve accounts. And there were discussions about amendments that took dollars out of proposed dollars away from permanent funds and put them into the LISRA. So all of that is part of this discussion. So there's a lot of moving parts elsewhere in our legislative work that are also in this bill. So some of the center, the sandwich of this bill is being done other places. We're having those discussions other places. So I'm not going to get into the details of, what dollars go to LISRA, what dollars go to the budget reserve account, how we, capture or get to this place. I want to focus on what I think are the 2 most important things and that's in section 1, what we budget based on, what we ask the executive branch, the governor, to base his budget on, and what we actually appropriate on. So that's the one. And then on the other end, that's where we get into how we fine tune that moving forward. This is not a one and done thing. It's not like in 2014 when I first brought this to the legislature, and the good chairman of this committee was then the chairman of appropriations. And I brought the budget amendment and I got up and I said, this is what I'd like to do. And he said, that's all well and good, but you don't have 2 years worth of money, Barlow. Whoosh, smack down on from the appropriations on the poor, second termer. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm sure you don't recall that. And so I understand that there are different, we've been doing it a certain way for a long time, and we've had success, but we also know that it has challenges, and the challenges are cyclic revenue and how we chase our programmatic interests and needs behind this cyclic revenue. Things go down, what do? We start cut, and then when things get improved, we start adding back. We saw that yesterday in our budget bill. We were adding back for DD waivers. Or not adding back, we were just trying to get to par with DD waivers and with youth services, et cetera. When you actually take, and I don't bring any graphs or anything, but talking with Mr. Richards and others, when you actually take a 2 or 3 year view, it's flat. Our revenues are not, they are fluctuating because we're commodity dependent, energy dependent in many ways, but over 2 or 3 years, they're actually very flat. So in my 16 years now that I've been involved in some level of state government, 6 years on a state board, and then 10 years in the legislature, I've seen three major ups and downs and some minor ones. But they all average out over time. Whether it's unanticipated revenue, such as TARP money from 2008, or CARES money, ARPA money now, or just improved commodity prices, there isn't a leveling, an averaging that occurs over time. So what this proposal is to take us a step back from that curve, take us a step back. And that is by actually funding the budget that we're going into with cash. Instead of budgeting on anticipated revenues and spending on that, we actually have money in the bank to pay the bills when the year starts. And that's as simple, I hope that's as simple as it comes. Now, are there pros and cons to this? Absolutely. Are there challenges? Yes. I'll give you the pros first. The pro side is we're at our lowest general fund obligation in 10, 12 years. Our general fund obligation right now for the state of Wyoming is lower than it's been in I think 5 or 6 budgets. Period. General fund. And we're in a unique opportunity right now because our commodity prices are good. Oil went over $100 yesterday. I'm sorry, the reason it's going over $100, but it's over $100 right now. Gas is in the mid fours. Coal production is good, decent for production price. Spot prices are very good. And we have an infusion of revenue replacement federal dollars. So we're at a unique place. Our general fund obligation is as low as it's been in my tenure in the legislature, and we have this influx of money. So if we do, and the good chairman talks about this, we don't have a cash deficit, we have a paper deficit. Where we put money makes a difference, and we're driven by profiles. And the governor, when he has to make cuts in the middle of a budget year like we did last year, he wasn't driven by loss of cash, he was by loss of projections. A loss of projections of revenue. So what this does is it tries to level that. So we're at a unique spot where we have a lower obligation looking forward, that's our budget is, lower obligation, and we have some revenues above what we anticipated. Now the negative side, I'll just give the two major things, is we're on a biennial budget. We don't have 2 years worth of cash just sitting there. We're very close to 1 year's worth of cash, just basically on current projections by the beginning of the next fiscal year. So 15, 16 months from right now, we could probably cash flow or cash front load our budget for the following year. So that you're going to hear the good chairman talk about, well, maybe we should go to annual budgets. I think that's part of that discussion. If we're going to fund on an annual basis, we can budget on an annual basis. Actually, might give the legislature twice as much appropriating power. Just in a simple way. We're going to look at things twice as often, in depth, and we'll be able to adjust and see forward. What we won't have to do is chase the curve. We won't be chasing the immediate curve. We won't be responding to cuts that the executive did and coming in and just rubber stamping cuts. We'll actually be seeing it off in the distance because we'll be preparing for the next year's revenues are coming in. We'll be preparing to say, hey, things are off or things are better. Well, when things are better, guess what? Then we have the one-time things we can talk about. Maintain our programs, we have the one-time things we can talk about. What do we do right now? Actually, our one-time things are the things we actually have cash for because we've set it aside. But the operations, we're betting on anticipated revenues. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to walk through the bill, but that's conceptually what I'm trying to get to. The good chairman has numerous amendments and I've looked through them. I think maybe there's a little gap in timing we have to talk about. And Mr. Richards and you've communicated with him. But my goal with this approach or this idea is to get us to a steady state where we can actually make rational decisions. Actually, I'm just speaking with an economist that we got to rationalize how we approach our budgeting and our cash flow process. And I think this is one way of doing that. I'm sure there's other good ideas out there. Just in my tenure in the legislature, this is one I just hate chasing the curve. And I hate it. I dislike it for several reasons. But the one is because it impacts our communities, impacts the programs that people, and what do? We restore them, just like we did yesterday. We restored the juvenile community services boards. We remember that conversation. We cut it. We lost in that, folks. we lost because some of those services went away. They've got to be reestablished and come back. I think we can get to a different place, a better place, where we have continuity and we're making if we have to make adjustments up or down, we're making them out in front of us, not right when they're on top of us. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we're at that point now of questions of the speaker, not comments on the bill yet, but if you have specific questions, and then I'm going to open it up to public comment, and then we'll work the bill, and the speaker will take us through the bill. So Representative Yen, question.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, thank you for bringing this bill. I think it's an interesting discussion. One concern I have is what the transition would look like, and especially what would the transition look like in the treasurer's office and the executive branch. And, you know, we heard a lot of questions during the budget process about the treasurer's office, and do you think that this additional load of a transition would be something that they could handle? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think the treasurer's office is, I don't think it's nearly as integral to this as probably the assessors, not assessors, the auditor's office. Auditors paying the bills. So what we have to do is ensure that there's cash on hand. And what she's doing the auditor is doing, Madam Auditor is doing right now is she's using actual cash to float the budget until revenues flow in. So we already have this. What this would actually do is, I believe, simplify it. I don't think it changes the treasurer's approach at all. I think it actually has the benefit of the auditor's office is actually, instead of borrowing from the LSRA or wherever we've given borrowing authority to actually pay the bills as revenues aren't coming in. Actually, I think it requires less cash management or bill management to get this accomplished. So I don't know that, and the good chairman, of course, is far more knowledgeable about the different entities, but I think it's the auditor's office that would find value in this and would value all of us. I don't know that it impacts the treasurer's office at all because they're managing they're managing the money, but actually who's paying the bills is through the auditor's office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaker, so in thinking about this, what are your thoughts on the impact? How would it work for schools, in your opinion?
Mr. Chairman, so I think the only impact that this bill contemplates is reducing the amount and this bill contemplates it. Doesn't have to be a part of the bill. It can be stripped from the bill. The chairman has an amendment that changes it. Is the LSRA currently is the backstop for K-12 education. And what the proposal before you in the bill is to take that drop dead switch from 500 to 250 million in the bill. And I think what that means is actually, to me, it means that education gets another $250 million worth of access to funds because currently at 500, they don't have any more access. This would actually drop to 250. Well, the reason it's dropping to 250 is we're going to use that LSRA to actually fund the cash budget. So we did drop it. But that does not have to be part of the combination. So I think I do agree that there is a challenge if we still have the imbalance we have in K-12 education and we're potentially relying on the LSRA. Is there a rub there? Yes, there is. But there are other accounts we can rely on. Yesterday, there was a budget amendment to put more money into the budget reserve accounts. So there are other places, there are cash on hand that we can use to do this without potential impact to that backstop for education. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions of the speaker? Representative Sweeney.
Thank you. In trying to get my head around this, Mr. Chairman and Speaker, so yesterday's conversations putting money back into certain programs, and a lot of it was certainly Department of Health areas of concern. How do you see, looking out into the future, that so we have ebbs and flows in those cash reserves, based on the economy, and our collections, how does that honestly change? Except that you've got cash in the bank, versus these projections. So is there not a risk of doing the same thing, going through this exercise? And so the next biennium, you might have cash in the bank and you're spending what you have. And the next 2 years, it appears there's going to be no cash in the bank. And how do you balance those needs and any differently than we're currently doing?
Okay, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, so I appreciate that. And I'm going to take us back to, I think, an example. Each one of us lived through 2020. Craig report came out May of 2020. Showed pretty ominous, things are ominous. Negative $40 oil, et cetera. Demand plummeted, et cetera. The governor had 3 tranches. That's not an executive branch word, that's a legislative word. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I want to give it away, that's right. Had 3 levels of cuts, 1, 2, 3. And he had to start making immediate decisions, and did. And some of us, decried some of those, shut down the rest areas along the highway, cut, reimbursement rates for Medicaid. I mean, there were frustrations. If we'd have had the cash in the bank for that fiscal year, when that happened, we'd have had those conversations in the legislative session 9 months later. And the governor would not have gone through those exercises in the same way. We'd have had those conversations and we would have adjusted it, made those adjustments. What did we do? We basically came in and rubber stamped most of those things. Rubber stamp's maybe not the right word, but we agreed with many of them. And we took second level and third level. And now what are we doing? We're trying to pull back on, we're trying to eliminate all the third, I can't remember what the word was, but the third ones, trying to restore some of the second ones. And then we're trying to make up for some just, absolute rebasing and type things as well with what we're doing right now. So in my view, that and serving on labor, health, and social services, there's 5 places where general funds go in the state of Wyoming. Department of Health, Department of Corrections, University, community colleges in cities, towns, and counties. That is the bulk of general funds. So where do you have to make a cut when you have a problem? It's got to come out of those big programs. And they all took cuts in there. There's no question. But if the money had been in the bank, we'd have had a much more, I think, a much better discussion about how we adjust what programs in a manner that we would have had more say in. We could have had those conversations with it. We left it to the executive branch and they went through it. I'm not saying they did a terrible job or a poor job. I just think it ought to be it's something we can deal with better, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to invite, are there members here of the public? And Mr. Speaker, if you just stay right there, we got 2 other seats, come sit by the speaker. And if anybody would like to comment on this bill, is there any public comment? Please come forward. Yeah, just queue up here. We got a couple seats. Introduce yourself, who you represent. Love to hear from you. And after public comment, we'll take a motion on the bill and work the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Cindy Delancey, and I'm the president of the Wyoming Business Alliance. I come before you today in just wanting to express the business community's appreciation for the speaker in bringing this topic forward. Appreciate the hard work of this committee to have these types of hard discussions. Now, whether this bill is the correct vehicle or not, who knows? But I will just applaud the bringer for driving the conversation forward about looking for alternatives to have revenue stability. As a business community, this is something we desperately need. We have to break this cycle of boom and bust. Listening to the discussion yesterday, as far as going from 400 positions that were cut to now having more money in the LISRA than we ever dreamed of. that's a pretty wide berth of swing there that the business community has a hard time navigating through these wide shifts. So one of our core principles in our organization is really promoting policy and seeking that stability in fiscal policy, regulatory policy. Business needs certainty to be successful. So just wanted to come before you today and thank you. You know, whether this conversation, if this bill, as I said, is the right vehicle or not, we haven't made any decisions on that. We're monitoring this. We're looking forward to learning more. But what my members do support is this conversation about how can we be at our best to create an economic environment that helps businesses thrive, because that's really what we need when you look at the other economies in surrounding states. Wyoming is the envy of many for so many reasons. You know, continuing this conversation about as we modernize our approach to keeping our fiscal house in order is really something that we would just absolutely, ask this committee to continue and you as a body to continue having those conversations as we move forward. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. Don't have anything specific on this bill as we're monitoring and looking forward to learning more, but really, again, applaud the bringer for driving this concept forward and happy. We stand at the ready in any way we can to contribute to the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from us? Representative Sweeney has a question.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I probably should have asked the speaker this, but are you aware of other states that actually do this same process?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sweeney, I'm not aware of any other states, but Wyoming's Constitution and our financial position is very unique unto ourselves. But other states are consistently looking again at ways of modernization and keeping that fiscal policy and approach to fiscal policy fresh. And so that's something that I encourage this body to continue to discuss.
Okay, thank you. Any other? Okay. Any other members of the public would like to comment? Just come on up, queue up here and introduce yourself and who you represent.
Can you hear me? Oh, there it is. Thank you. Hi, I'm Nina Weber. I'm from Park County. I've been here, thank you, Chairman Harshman and the rest of the representatives. I've been here for a week listening to some of the budget conversations that we have. I'm pretty excited that this bill was brought forth and would hope that you would see that in the state of Wyoming, especially this year and every year, there are many people that you all are representing that we have to live within our means. There's no reason our government should not. We should not. When we're at a time right now where gas prices are going through the roof and, oh gosh, the things at the grocery store are so expensive and people are having a lot of problems within the last 2 years, this is a great way to say, hey, Wyoming, we represent you and we support you. We're going to live the same way you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Weber? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Okay, any other members of the public? Okay, no one online. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close public comment. Members, what's your pleasure? Move the bill. Okay, it's been moved by Representative Henderson and seconded by Representative Jennings. Mr. Speaker and members, why don't you just take us through it kind of briefly, high level, page by page, and then we'll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I refer, if I could respond to Representative Sweeney's question about other states that may do this.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good, and I think that's a quick answer.
No.
Zero.
There are no states, and if we could approach this, that would put us into I believe, a whole nother class of fiscal responsibility and fiscal management that I think is what I would like this state to be. We're doing wonderful things and good things. I think this takes it to another level. Add in some of the other efforts that the chairman and come out of CapFin and some of those things, and I think it takes us to a whole nother level of stability as far as a government, state government, not only in this country, but I would say even worldwide. So, Mr. Chairman.
I think, so I'll just add to that. I think, every government budgets off of projections. Every government at every level. This would be unique, I think, and what a previous, Ms. Weber from Park County, Wyoming is probably the only state with zero debt, money in the bank, and it's really incredible. And I think what the speaker is trying to do here, I'll just paraphrase, our issue is volatility. I mean, it's not revenue long-term, it's volatility. And boy, you'd hate to run your own household like that. 1 month you have a paycheck, the next month nothing, the next month you got 2 paychecks. And so trying to work this out as a tool to bring a little stability. And so, Mr. Speaker, if you'd take us through your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll give you my personal experience. I mean, and I live paycheck to paycheck, and I get basically 1 paycheck a year when I sell my livestock. Now, it comes in over a couple month period because I sell different classes of livestock at a different time. And it's been taking me some time, but now I actually have, I'm fortunate, I have reserves. If things don't go well the next year, I'll survive the next year. Now, I can't survive 3 droughts in a row. If we drought out this year, it doesn't work again. That's what I'm trying to add, or that's what my own personal experience is. It took me time, took my family time to get there, to reduce our debt to a point where we could have that kind of opportunity. Wyoming is in that place right now. I believe this is right here before us if we want to take that up. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'll just walk quickly through the bill. So the first thing that this bill does, and this is page 2 through 4 of the bill, is that basically this is out of Title IX. This talks about, how the governor recommends a budget, how the governor brings forth his budget as he goes, as soon as we're done here, he'll start on his supplemental budget process. And the current governor or any governor will be working on that through next fall. And then in the middle of November, mid-November, they propose their budget to the legislature. Next year it'll be a supplemental budget because we're doing the general budget right now. So the budgeting process is occurring all the time. What this does is for that main budget, it says, and we'll go to bottom of page 3, this is how it's currently done, right now. Now we're going to go to a place where it says, you're going to estimate your budget on revenue, either in the general fund or budget revenue count for the past 3 years. So we know what we've received in the past 3 years. That's money that's already flowed in. So you can budget based on 2/3 of the last 3 years' revenue. Now, at the same time, it's my hope that we actually have at least 1 year or 2 years cash on hand to actually fund it. 2 would be ideal, to the chairman's point to me 8 years ago, but I think we could do it 1 year at a time. And here's the concrete example for me. I'll just put it out. If on December 31st of this past year, 2021, we'd have had the half of the 2.71 or 2.78, wherever we are in the general fund obligation, if we'd have had that 1.4, let's just use 1.4 billion in cash, when we came in this legislative session, we'd say, yep, this is the cash you have on hand, folks. Where are your priorities? You do your budget amendments. This is what we have. We got an extra 200 million for one-time projects. You go forward. And we start spending it on July 31st. So that's what we're asking the governor. Real cash, base it on real cash that's come in, real revenues. Our job is to have the cash on hand to actually implement it, whether it's a 1 year or 2 years at a time. So that's what this does. So on page 4, the new language on page 4, just saying, when you do this, Governor, your total recommended biennial, and we can have that conversation, and the good chairman is interested in maybe making that annual, and I think that's an improvement. I think that gets us closer to where we need the fiscal management we need. So that's the first part. The second part of the bill, and this is where you get into all these things that maybe not hadn't ought to be the focus of the bill. Focus of the bill is the first one. Base it on revenues we had. Second part is us actually have the cash on hand to actually fund the budget. The rest of it, this is page 5. This is the 500 to 250. This is the backstop for for education. Actually, I'm offering more backstop because there's another 250 million available. But recall, part of the way I'm doing this is by using some of the LSRA to fund this. So, it's a mixed bag. Could this go away and still get there in another way? Yes, we could. Budget reserve accounts, there's other ways to get there. So as you go through these, and a lot of these are just conforming language, distributions, page 7, this is where the chairman really does know, can run circles around folks like me. But this is the tips and all those things as monies flow in and flow out. And all I'm trying to do with all of these different suggestions is conserve cash. Conserve cash. And it can be conserved several ways. This approach was LSRA, because we're all familiar with that, right? Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account. We could rename it. Representative Gray likes to rename accounts. We'll have the Legislative Budget Stabilization Reserve Account. Because that's what we're trying to do, get the cash on hand so we can do this. Because when we put that cash in permanent funds, then it's out of reach. We have the earnings from it, but we don't have the cash to front load this system. Once this system is front loaded, we can go back to saving as much as we want, and we actually are saving real cash. We're actually saving real cash. So that's put through page 7. This is that, the excess types, when you roll it over, this goes to the LSRA. Go to page 9. This is the SIPA, SIPA LSRA. We split that money right now. What is it, over the 5%? This is where you guys actually do know the information, and I'm not, because this isn't where I want to focus it. We can get there a lot of different ways. And some of these, the chairman will say, let's not do that one because we can get better value out of something else, or there's another way to do it. So the next one is the SIPA LSRA, and you go to page, let's see, I've got to make sure I keep track here. This is where you're getting into the earnings and the tippings. We actually do create another account. No, I guess that's still there, sorry. We just flipped the name, sorry. Page 10 into bottom of page 10. This is another distribution that conserves cash. And this one is, I gotta keep track. This bill did not have my labels on it, so the severance tax distribution. So we're trying to gather all the cash we can from every possible flow there is and just keep it so we can front load this system. Investment earnings, this is on page 12. This will be in the section 2. We run that up before it tips over. And what that does is help conserve funds so we're not so reliant on the LSRA to backstop education. So we keep more money from flowing into the permanent fund on education. So all of these things are designed to keep cash, keep us, hopefully insulate the education side, and not tip money into the permanent fund. And Mr. Chairman, I think that's essentially all of it. Section 3 is probably the most important part, and I know the chairman thinks that the Appropriations Committee ought to have a hand in this too, not just the Revenue Committee, but I'd like to stay with the Revenue Committee. Or both, or a combination. Because really, when we think about the things you've been charged to do, and I look at the 5 terms that I've spent in the legislature, you guys have tough sledding. You gotta actually start tax bills and then try to get them through a House of Representatives, which is constitutionally required to start the bills. And it's not easy. Talked about the tourism tax a couple of days ago. Talked about fuel tax. Didn't come up this year. Didn't come out of this committee either. Thank you. But that's tough. So I think this is a way we can actually, I believe, understand how we can avoid taxes, get stability in our revenue flows, avoid taxes when possible, and maybe have and this was a discussion we had this morning, the chairman and I were in a visit with an economist, rationalize our revenue system, rationalize our tax system so that we have stability. So, Mr. Chairman, there's some findings, intent at bottom of page 13. These are just, let's get there. Let's get there. Can't get there overnight. Don't have an infusion, don't want to go borrow the money to do it. Don't want to go borrow the money to do it. Let's do it with the cash as it flows in and the cash we have on hand. So, Mr. Chairman, I know that's a high-end flyby, but really the guts of the bill are not the guts. The principle on the front end is Let's budget based on cash on hand. Our end is to actually fund the budget with cash. And in the middle, how we accomplish that, just like we had the discussion in the budget yesterday, there's many ways to get that done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that was pretty high fly, but
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, do you have any ideas about how we could try to get more cash into LISRA? I mean, we could do a notwithstanding statement on some of the distributions into permanent funds in the budget. That's one thing I've thought of. I mean, we just need to try to get as much cash in there as possible. And, you know, I do think this is a policy choice, and we can't have everything. And I think we need to think about some of the distributions we're doing in this budget. Wherever it ends up in this annual versus biennial thing, I still think we should try to keep as much in LISRA as possible. And have you thought about some other amendments we could do as this process proceeds? Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I am thinking about those things. And as I mentioned, alluded to earlier, the budget bill yesterday, we had several things that changed where money was flowing to. We had proposals come out of the Joint Appropriations Committee, put 75, 75, 75. Yesterday, I think, and I don't know, I honestly can't remember where we ended up, but I know the good chairman of this committee sent some to the budget reserve accounts. And that was, you know, one of the last 5 or 10 amendments. Anyway, and I honestly, haven't done the summary sheet or looked at it to see what we end up. So I think we're going to get to there. My hope is that we keep this, if this committee so chose and the body so chooses, we keep this bill moving and we make those adjustments as we go, because we'll know as the budget we get into conference committee, we'll know some of those things. And when we get, if this bill moves, we can say, okay, we got to make an adjustment here. We got to make an adjustment here. And so we can actually modify the bill as we may take care of things. Recall that on page 4, the revenue is general fund and budget reserve accounts. And then we fund it through the LSRA, but we can actually change the tip points on the reserve accounts to help us there. We could actually flip part of the money off of the budget reserve accounts into the LSRA too, if we were short at some point in advance of a fiscal year. So I think there's other tools that unfortunately, I don't have the depth of knowledge that some of you, and certainly the chairman does, of all the tools and all the levers we can pull, but I think they're there. I also think that, you know, we're on day 9 of the 66th Wyoming legislative budget session. We got another 10 days. We can keep trying to get the right combination to get those things accomplished. And I'm confident with, you know, the support of this committee and the body, we'll continue to work on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, members who are at that point to work the bill, I have a pretty substantial amendment that I emailed to all of you, and I have paper copies. But if we want to take that up, or do we want other amendments you want to work? I'm good at either way. I can bring it any time when we're ready, but Mr. Chairman?
And Mr. Chairman, I mean, it's your prerogative. I mean, if you're interested in advancing the bill, I think we can take that amendment up on second and third reading, because we got only so much time for committee of the whole. If this is a bill that's of interest to this committee and to the chairman, we want to continue this discussion, I'm going to respectfully just throw out there that if you want to pass the bill out as is, get it off committee of the whole, and then second and third reading, we just grind on it. We spend time doing the things that, you know, we want to, so we have a product that we're comfortable with. And I'm only saying that out of respect for the process and a little bit of selfishness. I want to get it out, get it up and have the discussion. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I think too, we can, you know, if we run out of time this morning, we can certainly come back on adjournment, finish up, do a little of that if we need to, and just keep working this too. Okay, so members, and I hear you, we're going to have a little action, Jackson, on this before we leave here in
Mr.
15
Chairman.
minutes, for sure, Mr. Speaker. Representative Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would appreciate, I have not gotten a chance to fully digest the amendment, and I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that if you do want the committee to, one, if we could get that paper copy, and two, if we could work the amendment after, a little later today, if you do want to bring it in committee. I would ask if you'd consider doing that. I mean, I understand we got 15 minutes, but I would like to review it. But
Okay, I'm gonna try to distribute this. I think I
Miss,
got enough copies. I had 11 there.
you
I'm
need,
not sure if I do or not. Oh, what do we got here?
oh,
Well, I've got the bill, I've got it written into the bill.
oh, you do, okay. So,
Yeah, the amendments are written into the bill, makes it easier for you. And I've got, yeah, pass that down. Pass it.
Mr.
Any
Chairman,
extra? You need another one now?
no, I think we,
So this is written into
We're-
the
we're
bill. We got the amendment as well. And I'm gonna go ahead now, distribute the amendment, but it's written in the bill, it'll be easier to follow, I think. So just take one of those and set that aside. And really, members, so I'm gonna just move this amendment. As chairman, it's a little odd, but I'm gonna, and been seconded by, Mr. Vice Chair. Really what this does is take this to annual budget. So it's still cash budgeting, but, and we can work through this thing, because we can start this much easier with annual budgeting. And I think there's some, the good speaker talked about the pros and cons, the philosophical pros and cons. And this is the same way with biennial and annual budgeting. I think, one of the pros of biennial budgeting is when you have downturns, you give the chief executive 24 months to make those adjustments and not 12 months. But if you're in a cash budget situation, you're not working off projections, you've got the cash in the bank, and then we go to work to figure it out, or the next. So that's part of it. The other con, I guess, the negative for annual budgeting is, about agencies of state government. How much time are they gonna have to spend extra to develop an annual budget? How much different will it be? I think the pro part of it, for us as appropriators, it's not gonna be 18 months before you really look at it again. And I think you've got a chance to kind of watch this, and you're on top of it more. And then I think also, members, that in reality, we're doing annual budgets anyway. We're gonna bring a budget bill next year, it's appropriations is meeting, developing budgets every year. And so that's really why I bring this annual cash budgeting, because frankly, I don't think, there's some real risk to going to a 2-year cash budget right now. There's real risk, because we're gonna draw our reserves pretty low to do it. And I think we can have that risk, half it, cut it in half, and I think we can still get there and probably have better legislative oversight. And so really, that's the intent of this. So Mr. Speaker, do you have the copy where it's in the?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I do, but I also have an obligation upstairs in
Yeah.
about 10 minutes. So I'm going to leave it in your capable hands if that's acceptable.
Sure, and we're gonna flip through this pretty quick. 'cause
Chief Clerk and I have a little routine. She lets me
bet.
know what I need to do at 10 o'clock.
I don't wanna get you in trouble with the chief.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My
Very good.
apologies, committee.
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, and we'll just walk through this, members, and so, you can see on first page, can you all see the small type lettering that's typed in there? On the copy I had, it was in green, but you can see it on there. And so really it changes to annual. Flipping over to page 2, once again, it changes the 2 to 1, and then this page 2 and 3 is current statute, and you can see where the good speaker on the bottom of page 3 then eliminates this part of the statute in July of '23, because this is currently the way the government proposes a budget. We moved cash budgeting, that will change, and it goes over to page 4, where the new method for the chief executive to propose a budget. And you can see changes of biennial to annual and 1 fiscal year, and it still kept the speaker's idea of using the previous 3 years as an average, and then taking a third of that as his proposal. All right, so that's really no change to any of that policy. Going over to page 5, this is where the good speaker tries to get the cash pooled together to pull this off, right? Because if you do 2 years, you're gonna need basically 1.7 billion in the bank, cash. Go ahead, question, Mr. Jennings, Representative Jennings.
Mr. Chairman, so is there any complications that you can see, because the last 2 years have been abnormal?
Yeah.
So addressing that, could you
I-
talk a little bit about that?
I think Representative Jennings brings up a really good point on page 4, and I think the committee would be wise to keep working on this, because exactly what he just said, that works pretty good in stable years. But what about when you've had a downturn, and now like this year, we're coming out of it again? And so that affects the governor's proposal. Now, that wouldn't affect how we appropriate, right? We could see those changes on the ground, but I think there is some way we could probably think about that, the average or the, a way to, and I don't know if we need to solve it now, but I agree. Go ahead.
So another question, Mr. Chairman, how about the influx of federal dollars into our budget in the last 2 years? How does that affect this part?
I think this is all based on, well, it would raise it. Yeah, it would raise that average, absolutely. And so that, the issue with this average going forward is 3 years the right number. Maybe it's 5 years. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to throw out an anomaly, I agree. I've thought about it, but I haven't solved it, I agree. I think it's a great question. So members, and then start on the bottom page 4 with the LSRA, you can see where the speaker's trying to start pooling cash. He moved the 500 to 250. This amendment would move it even to 100, because you're gonna pull cash out of the LSRA. It's gonna go from 1.6 billion now to under 500 million, right? Or, okay, and then his part of the bill then was gonna start with FMRs, and I just eliminated all that, and then and severance tax, and so keep going over to page 7. Kept this in here and moved the reserve account up from 150 to 300%. So, and that's similar to what he had, to keep that in there. And eliminated some of the other, I'll just real quick, on the bottom of page 8 and over to page 9 was really the SIPA. And he eliminated the SIPA for a couple of years to garner more cash. This amendment takes that provision out. I think the SIPA, we've got, I just didn't want to eliminate that. So that's that part. Go ahead, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to understand why you took out the severance tax distribution, or the, that's the FMR distribution on page 7. Why did you take that out? Because we're trying to build up cash in LISRA, and why do you think that's important to take out?
Representative Gray, I don't think it's needed, because really, where is that gonna flow? I mean, it's gonna flow to the budget reserve account, and it's gonna flow to the school foundation account. And I just think if you're gonna take, I mean, you're basically taking it from one hand and putting it in the other. And you're gonna have to make that up somehow out of the LSRA. So, to put it all in the LSRA will just make a bigger draw out of the LSRA. And so I just left that alone. So it'll fill up budget reserve account and the school foundation account. Okay, so then flipping over, I think we're on page 8 and 9. I left the SIPA alone. The strategic investment projects account. Flipping over to page 10 is another area where the speaker collects cash. I left this in the bill, This is the 1%. This is a key part of the bill, I think, the 1% statutory severance. It's about 100 million a year. Pull 3 years of that and put that into the LSRA, 3-4 years of that. So that remains in the bill. So yeah, I think all that stays pretty stable. And then flipping over to page, it's on the backside of page 11. Currently, we split that 1% severance between common school account and the permanent fund, and then it goes back to that split. And that'll be 2027. There's 2 dates there. It should be 2027 is when that would go back to that split. Flipping over to page 12, again, it increases the reserve amount, so we have less tip into the permanent fund. This is currently in the bill, leaves that in there. And then section 3 in this committee, I just put this and changed it and put it with the appropriations committee. And I just thought for budget development, they could work all this instead of this committee. Now, you might not, and it changes the biennial to annual, but the big change there is what committee works with that. And then you can see the effective date on page 14, line 15. And so that's it. It puts, this is a little change here as well on, this is a big change. It says this will not go into effect until there's $2 billion in the LSRA. So that's really that's the amendment. Mr. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering briefly if you would comment. I know that the former Senator Enzi, he used to really champion the way that Wyoming budgets biannually as a matter of stability, stating that the annual budgets really cause more chasing of those volatile revenues. So would you be willing to comment as to, what the annual budgeting process would then, the image that would create for the rest of the nation? Because again, I think we've kind of championed ourselves on, we're going to budget biannually, and we kind of had a little discussion about the history of this anyway. So thank you.
Yeah, I think, again, kind of pros and cons to both. I think a legislator might say, the real con is once you appropriate that, the executive branch can hide it from the legislative branch for 18 months, basically. And you don't really see all that movement. And so that's a con. The pro, it probably is some stability piece to that. Unless, you have downturns, then the chief executive, we give him the ability in the budget to adjust budgets based on revenue projections. But if we're going to go to cash budgeting, where we say we got $750 million for this 1 year, and this is how we're going to spend it. I think, frankly, I think it's doable with the cash we have. When you go to 2-year cash budgeting, it gets pretty close. So that's my comment on it. I think it's, it's all over the map as far as states. We've done biennial budgeting. I think we're real comfortable with it. This would be a change, I think. But I think looking over the last decade, we do a lot of work in the supplemental budget. We've done a lot of work in the in the last 3 budgets, we've brought in every agency into a supplemental budget, frankly, to make cuts. And so it's not like we've come in with just a little tiny supplemental budget bill. They've been large bills, just like this current budget bill.
It's a good start.
So I don't know. It's a good question, I think. What we have now is not horrible. It's not horrible, but I think this philosophical and this important change, if you want to pursue cash budgeting, I think the best way to do it's annual. That's why I brought the amendment. So, yeah. Representative Roscoe and then Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, as I'm trying to get my head around this, and we're trying to ease into this or you would rather. Have we run this by our financial advisor, Don Richards?
Yeah, LSO Fiscal has been really involved with this, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, trying to provide the numbers. You bet.
okay, thank you.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a great start. One thing I'm thinking about is getting full value out of the dollars that we plan to spend, and then when we actually spend them. And so this sets us up for that opportunity, and of course the transition. But I really think this is a very good start. There's really not a lot of things in here that I don't think we can talk about and address in terms of preparation, inputs, transition, and implementation. I'm not sure it's possible, in a short period of time, but like say if we did it over a couple of years. I really do, particularly in terms of the value of money. But we don't know what the agencies, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we don't know what the agencies are going to have in terms of what they see as their possible constraints in terms of being able to, take in the information, get it processed, and be ready to provide us with that information.
Okay, any other questions? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate this amendment and the work in it, but I would ask for a no on the committee on this amendment. I think there's a number of things here that I think are a step backwards on the bill. One is reversing the elimination of SIPA. I just think that's a really good policy choice. I think the Senate wants to do it. I think the House has almost been there a number of times. I think we should do that. I think we should try to get as much cash as possible into LISRA. And I do think we should try to shoot for keeping the biennial budgeting. And I think if we make a couple changes to the budget, I mean, even 50 to 60 million of the permanent fund distribution, if we reverse that, I think we'd get there by the time this bill calls for it to be implemented. The other thing I'm a little disappointed on in this amendment is moving it over to the Appropriations Committee. This really is a revenue topic. I mean, we're not dealing with the appropriations. We're dealing with the flows and how we handle them. And I really think if you look in statute, that's what the Revenue Committee was supposed to address. One of my struggles politically with that too is it's difficult. Cash-based budgeting removes, let's just talk about the politics of this. Cash-based budgeting removes some of the power of the appropriators because they have a cap, which is how much cash is on hand. So I don't think they like it very much. I think the introductory vote shows that. And whether or not we move to annual or biennially, I think that the question of how much is appropriated is within this bill and is going to be within statute now. And really their decision will be how that's distributed. And I think this is really a revenue topic and we should be looking at those statutes. So for a couple reasons, I'm going to be voting no. Thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions? And let me just throw this out. We want to come back, keep working this? You want to come back at lunch or
I got a meeting at lunch.
or on adjournment?
Yeah. I support the amendment.
On adjournment, yeah. Yeah, I think we'd have to go on adjournment. We're not gonna go late tonight. It's like last night. Yeah. Then I think it gives us more time to kind of. Yeah. And folks who are here, we're not gonna work this thing till 10 tonight. We're gonna put another half hour into it. And I think, I don't know, I'm judging the sense of the committee, but I think we're all in favor of moving this concept forward. We just want to make sure we kind of think, talk through some of this and discuss it and think
Miss-
about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'm not comfortable with any of this at this point in time. I've got a ton, I wouldn't say a ton of questions, but I worry about the Department of Health in this process. What do we do without the cash reserves on downturns? You can't just cut hundreds of millions of dollars out of the process just because the cash isn't in the bank. And I'm not prepared to go back to our citizens and say, well, Granny's got to get kicked out of the nursing home because we don't have the Medicaid match. And other programs. So I would be fine over the interim to look at this. But at this point, I'm not prepared. I'm
Well, why don't we go and recess until adjournment? And then it'll give us some time to kind of keep working and thinking, and we've got some other work to do on the floor. So,
Mr. Chairman, we will not be able to meet in this room upon adjournment. I'll have to find another room because the governor's art show is 5 to 7 tonight. So
okay, perhaps be a room up on
I'll find you something.
the east side,
Sure.
first
We'll
floor.
see what we can do, and I will send you an
Okay,
email
so
or
we'll get that
text.
announced and get it out on the website. And folks who are interested, we'll get that announced.
Okay,
Okay, thank you very much.
thank you.